Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full predictions and fight card breakdown for UFC 308 live Saturday, October 26th from Abu Dhabi, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into it, and we're going to go right ahead and jump into the very first fight of the night, which is Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett, and a very interesting fight here, super interesting fight. Kennedy Nzechukwu coming off of a little bit of a rough streak, coming off two tough losses to Ovince St. Preux and Dustin Jacoby. And Chris Barnett, ever since he stormed into the UFC I'd say about 3 years ago, he has been such an interesting character. I mean, just a little ball of fun. I believe his nickname's the Cuddly Bear. And I mean, he's just a big dumpling of a dude. I mean, pretty fun to watch fight. And all smiles. Did the crazy spinning wheel kick to Jean Vellante back about 2 years ago, knocked him out. And that just skyrocketed him to the moon with a little burst of popularity. So he's a very fun fighter to watch. But in this fight, I think this is kind of a tough mismatch for him because even though Kennedy is coming off some losses, he still has a lot of potential, and he's a very big guy for the division. He is 6'5" with an 83-inch reach, and Chris Barnett is only 5'9" with a 75-inch reach. So Kennedy is going to have an 8-inch reach on Chris Barnett, and he's got great striking. He's long, he's powerful, he's very technical, and even though Kennedy has some lapses in judgment, I do think in this fight he is going to be a little too much for Chris Barnett. Chris Barnett is also coming off a 2-year layoff, I believe. I believe his last fight was, 2 years against Jake Collier. So that, the long layoff, the much shorter fighter in reach, and the fact that he's been off 2 years, and at 38 years old, that is not really looking good for him. And the Tapology odds are pretty close here, 61 to 39%, but I think this is a pretty easy win for Kennedy, and if he was to lose this fight, that would be very concerning. I mean, this is not a fight he should be losing right now. So I'm going to go with Kennedy Nzechukwu by second round TKO. I think he will catch Chris Barnett with a shot, hurt him, and wind up TKOing him. If not, he picks up a pretty easy 30-27 unanimous decision. All right, and we are moving on up to Said Nurmagomedov versus Daniel Santos, and a very interesting fight here. Said Nurmagomedov, I mean, a classic Dagestan wrestler. Well, they are all Terminators from Russia. All the fighters are just top level, so hard to deal with. They all have excellent grappling, excellent jiu-jitsu, and pretty solid stand-up. And Daniel Willie Cat Santos, man, he's very solid. 29 years old. Out of Shootbox Diego Lemo, a fantastic gym. And, he's got a very solid record going on here. I mean, his last 2 wins against solid competition against Johnny Munoz Jr. and John Castaneda, who's very well-rounded, with a loss back before that against Julio Arce. Nothing to knock on him against there. But in this fight, Said Nurmagomedov has just been on a roll outside of his loss to, I believe it was Jonathan Martinez. Yes, his loss to Jonathan Martinez, not going to knock him on that. Jonathan Martinez is one of the best fighters in the division and one of the best leg kickers in the UFC. Very hard to deal with. But when it comes to the end of the day with this fight, I mean, Said Nurmagomedov has excellent jiu-jitsu. He has nasty guillotines. He has nasty Bravo chokes. And he's just very good with the pace and the wrestling. And I think in this fight, he will outpace and out-wrestle Daniel Santos. I think it could be a competitive fight, but I do trust that Said Nurmagomedov's wrestling is just going to get this done. And the scrambling ability, the pressure, the top control, and he might even submit Daniel Santos in this fight. He could wrap up a neck very easily because his best chokes are neck chokes. So I am going to go with Said Nurmagomedov in this fight by unanimous decision. I think he picks up a pretty clear 30-27. Maybe Daniel Santos makes a round kind of close, steals one. Said picks it up 29-28. But at the end of the day, I see Said Nurmagomedov pretty easily picking up this win with just the pace, the pressure, the wrestling, and the control. So we are moving on up, flying right through these. We are going up to Bruno Silva versus Ismail Naurdiev. And a very interesting fight here. Bruno Silva, he's been around quite a while now in the UFC, and he's been very underwhelming for the most part. He has lost a lot of fights. He's gotten knocked out multiple times. And then in his last fight, he fought Chris Weidman, and that was a severely controversial fight. One of the most ridiculous calls I've ever seen in my life. I'm not a Chris Weidman fan at all. I think Chris Weidman is one of the most overrated fighters in UFC history. The way that he won the belt, Anderson Silva was pretty much picking him apart in that fight, piecing him up, and then Anderson decided to screw around and dick around too much and got caught, and that catapulted Chris Weidman into winning the belt, going on a little bit of a padded run, fighting a juiced-up Vitor. Then he fights Machida. Machida doesn't do anything until the very end of the fight, where it was too little too late. So there was just a lot of little padded moments for Chris Weidman's reign, and then I called it back when he fought Luke Rockhold. I said, when he fights a guy that is at his age, better at his skill level in the striking and the grappling, and it's not, a fighter that's out of their prime, that's on, fucking steroids, juiced up TRT in a fight, people that aren't dicking around and dancing around in the fight. When he fights a guy that is a level above him and actually comes at him and brings the fight to him, he's going to get beat. And Luke Rockhold did that and exposed him. And then Weidman wound up going on an insane losing streak. So, this last fight with Bruno Silva was absolutely ridiculous because Bruno was struggling in the fight a bit, but he was beating Weidman. And then Weidman blatantly poked him in the eyes like 3 or 4 times. And they went to the replay, and it was very clear that he got poked in the eyes, and they somehow gave the fight to Weidman anyway, and it wasn't a no contest, which was insane because it was a clear as day eye poke. They gifted it to Weidman, one of the most atrocious calls I've ever seen. And in that fight, even though Bruno should have won that fight, he still didn't look that impressive. And in this fight, Ismail actually had a run with the UFC back a few years ago. He was up and down, win, lose, win, lose. They cut him, and now he's back. And even though I haven't followed Ismail outside of the UFC in this most recent run, he is coming off a win. He is the younger fighter. He does have the better record right now. And I am going to trust in this fight that he is going to come in and he's going to beat Bruno Silva. I think the UFC is bringing him back for a reason. I think he's going to probably have the edge in just the youth, the speed. But Bruno Silva, he's still tough. He still has a little bit in the tank. But I'm going to take a shot in the dark here and say that Ismail picks up a unanimous decision win and beats Bruno Silva on the cards. Maybe he comes back and doesn't look so good, and Bruno Silva just picks him apart for 3 rounds, just barely edges it. But I'm going to give this kid a shot and say that he can beat Bruno Silva, because Bruno Silva is just declining. Again, he should have beat Chris Weidman, but just didn't look good in the fight, and I'm not impressed by him. A lot of losses, getting up there at age at 35. So we will go ahead with Ismail Naurdiev by decision. And moving on up, we are looking at Farid Basharat versus Victor Hugo in a very interesting fight here. The Basharat brothers are absolutely fantastic. They are 2 of the most talented brothers in the UFC. They're just very well-rounded fighters. They're calm, they're patient, they're tactical, they have great stand-up. They're very thoughtful fighters. They don't make many mistakes in the cage. And Farid has been very good recently. He is on a streak. And he's a heavy favorite in this fight for a reason. And Victor Hugo, pretty solid. He's won his last 5 fights, 25-4 record. Farid is coming with a 12-0 record. Both similar heights, 5'8" to 5'7", and exact same reaches. But in this fight, there is very few times I'm ever going to pick against the Basharat brothers because they're just very good. And I think Basharat will be the better fighter overall anywhere this fight goes. I think he'll be better in the stand-up, he'll be better with the pressure, and he will be better with the grappling if it needs to go there. And I am going to go ahead and pick Farid Basharat by decision. I think this will be a easy, unanimous 30-27 for him in this fight. Victor Hugo could make it competitive in moments, but the Basharat brothers are just very tactical, very, calm, sniper-esque kind of fighters, and they just pick you apart, and they're just hard to deal with once they start building that momentum over the course of a 15-minute fight. So I am going to go Farid Basharat by unanimous decision over Victor Hugo. And we are moving on up to a very interesting fight with Mitabek Orolbai versus Mateusz Rebecki, and a very interesting fight. Mitabek Orolbai kind of just burst on the scene back a few months ago, picking up some very impressive wins. Last win, very competitive fight with Elvis Brenner, and before that, a submission neckcrank on Uros Medic, and that's when he debuted. And then Mateusz Rebecki has been a storm. He's been very, very hard to deal with for most guys, but he did get beat up bad in his last fight against Diego Ferreira, and it was a very tough beating in that fight. I mean, he's stuck in there for about a round and a half, and then Diego's experience just started coming back and just beating on him bad. And even though Mateusz Rebecki, I mean, he's still very solid, he still has a lot of potential. Even though Mitabek Orolbai is not fully proven yet, these guys from, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, these fighters in those regions are almost like the Dagestani fighters. I mean, they're just solid. These guys can just come straight out of these countries, and they all just have this ability to put a pressure on you, to put a pace on you. They all have great chins. They all are just natural-born fighters. And because of that, I am going to say that Mitabek Orolbai continues this streak. I think it's going to be a very interesting competitive fight, especially in the first round and a half. I think Mateusz Rebecki can make it very interesting. But I'm going to say that Mitabek Orolbai puts the pressure, the pace, and the hands on Mateusz Rebecki, makes it very close, and I'm going to say that he picks up a unanimous decision, possibly a 29-28 unanimous. I think maybe Mateusz could possibly steal a round from him, maybe in the beginning, but I think as the fight goes, Mitabek is he's just gonna pick up steam, he's gonna pick up momentum, and he will get it done with the hands and the grappling, and I see him picking up a decision over Mateusz Rebecki. All right, we are moving on up quickly to Ibo Aslan versus Rafael Cerqueira. I'm assuming I'm saying that right, Cerqueira. And a very interesting fight here. Ibo Aslan, I mean, the guy is he's got a ton of knockout power in his hands. Has looked very impressive. I believe he's coming off of a Contender Series fight about a year ago, and then before that was the beatdown that he put on Anton Takarli, whatever his last name is. It's somewhere in there, Takarli. So, what he was able to do in that fight, knocking him out with a nice overhand right. I mean, he's looked very impressive. 6'3", 77-inch reach. And Rafael Cerqueira, I do not know a whole lot about him, but looking at his record, he's coming off demo fight, was winning fights over in this promotion. I don't believe I've heard of demo fights, so I don't know how legit they are over there. But at the end of the day, still coming from a kind of a B, C league promotion. But he's 11-0, so obviously he must be pretty decent there. But with the research on Ibo Aslan, I am going to say that this is probably going to be a pretty easy fight for him, and he is going to get a devastating knockout early because he has a lot of KO wins. He's got 5 of his last 5 wins here have been by knockout. So, I mean, vicious power in his hands, and I think he's going to come in and he's going to wind up putting Rafael to sleep in the first round, if not the second round. I think he's just going to be explosive, and that power is just going to continue. He's going to build in the fight, and he's going to wind up putting Rafael Cerqueira out and picking up this first round KO. So we will go Ibo Aslan by first round knockout. All right, moving on up, we are looking at Abus Magomedov versus Bruno Ferreira, and this is a very interesting fight because Bruno Ferreira has been an absolute tank since he's come in the UFC. I mean, he is only 5'10", but he has got absolute cannon power in his hands. He's a devastating hitter. He has got just nasty one-punch power. And Abus Magomedov has been a little underwhelming. He came in, picked up a few wins, then he fought Sean Strickland, and Sean Strickland put that pace, that pressure on him, and he just broke Abus. Abus could not keep up with Sean's cardio. Abus gassed badly, and he just crippled and crumpled under the pressure of Strickland. And then he came back and got the win over Warley Alves. After that, I forgot, after he fought Strickland, he lost to Caio Borralho, and Caio Borralho is just absolutely on a roll right now, one of the best up-and-coming fighters in the division. And so this is a very interesting fight because Bruno in the first round is absolutely devastating. He is a nightmare in the first round, and if he touches your chin, you're going down. But Abus has kind of the more of the later round experience in his fight, and a lot of his fights have gone into the second, have gone into the third round, and Bruno Ferreira, the vast majority of his fights have not gone out of the first round. The vast majority, especially his more recent fights, and the fights that have been in the UFC so far. So in this fight, I'm looking at it as, in the first round, Bruno has the best chance with his power in his hands. And if he touches Abus is going down bad. But if he cannot put Abus away in the first round and this fight gets extended into the second round, this is where we could see Bruno and where his cardio is at. Because if his cardio starts to dump in the second round after throwing these big power shots, Abus could wind up coming back and picking him apart and stealing this win. And Abus is not that, not that threatening, not that impressive on the feet, but he has had multiple second and 3-round fights. He does seem to have, a little bit of the edge and just the overall, striking volume. And I think it's just a very interesting fight. But I am going to say that Bruno Ferreira, at some point in this first round, catches Abus with a big shot, hurts him and drops him bad and TKOs him. And if he cannot put Abus away in the first round, it's going to get very interesting. And I see a very easy path for Abus to come back and take a decision. So Bruno's just going to have to be very on point in that first round. He's going to have to get in his face and land that shot and take him out, because once it gets into the second round, we just don't know where all that heavy muscle that he carries is going to start to weigh on his cardio, and then Abus could just wind up just picking him apart with volume and stealing the decision. But I'm going to trust Bruno Ferreira, catches Abus in a slow moment, hits him with a big shot, drops him, and TKOs him. So we will go Bruno Ferreira KO round 1. All right, and we are moving on up to Jeff Hands of Steel Neal versus Rafael dos Anjos, RDA, the legend, and a super interesting fight here. I mean, Rafael dos Anjos is an absolute veteran in the UFC, been around forever, former champion, but he is up there in age. He is 40 years old, and he is struggling bad. He has lost many of his most recent fights. There was Rafael Fiziev knocked him out in the 5th round with the left hook, which was a great last-second KO. And then he lost to Vicente Luque very clearly and Mateus Gamrot very clearly. So it has just not been looking great for Rafael dos Anjos at his age. And he's given us great fights over the years. He's been around for, I believe he's been in the UFC for 15 years. I mean, an absolute legend. Has had some incredible wins. But Jeff Neal, even though Jeff Neal is coming off some losses, the very close loss to Ian Gary, very controversial fight, almost a case for him to win that. Jeff Neal still has it, man. He's got great hands, he's got great speed, and he is a problem on the feet. And at 5'11" with a 5-inch reach on a 40-year-old RDA, I think this is a very bad matchup for RDA, and I think Jeff Neal easily wins this fight. Now, my gut is telling me Jeff is just going to easily pick Rafael apart for 3 rounds, easy 30-27, clean win all day. I do not see Rafael really posing any threat or challenge to Jeff, but I'm going to say, because Rafael has been knocked out in the past, he got knocked out by Jeremy Stephens with a nasty uppercut, and he got knocked out by Rafael Fiziev. I'm going to say that Jeff Neal can land a nasty shot on RDA and catch him and drop him. And I'm going to take a chance. If not, he's going to pick up an easy 30-27 unanimous decision. But I'm going to say Jeff Neal catches RDA in the second round with a shot, drops him, and TKOs him. And now we finally start to see RDA's chin just fully give out. And, it's going to be pretty much talking retirement time for RDA, even though he's such a legend and, we all love him. But I think Jeff Neal is just still, he's young, he's fast, he's got great hands, he's still a problem, and I think he's going to be too much for RDA in this fight. So we are going to take a chance on Jeff Neal knocking RDA out, TKOing him. I don't see him knocking him out cold, but TKOing him in the second round, if not a easy 30-27 unanimous decision. All right, moving on up. We are looking at Shara Magomedov versus Arman Petrosyan, and a very interesting fight here. Shara Magomedov has been, very impressive since he stepped into the UFC. He's got one eye, basically came from a detached retina. Same thing Michael Bisping had, a detached retina that just got worse, and now he's blind in that eye. But for a one-eyed fighter, the guy has looked very good. He's got some excellent kicks. He's very good backing up. He's very good on the cage. Throws a lot of kicks, throws a lot of volume, and just overwhelms you. And Arman Petrosyan has looked very, solid. He's picked up a good bit of wins, had a few losses here and there, but, just a solid mid-level fighter. But I think in this fight, Shara Magomedov is he's on a roll. He's hard to deal with when you back him up. His kicks are hard to deal with. You know, he throws a lot of leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, and he just overwhelms you with those. And I think in this fight, I think he can do that to Arman Petrosyan, and I am going to say that he continues his win streak and he picks up a unanimous decision over Arman Petrosyan. And I think it'll be pretty clean, pretty easy. You know, Arman might be able to give him some fits early on. Maybe makes the first round close. Maybe steals around 29-28 for Shara Magomedov. But I think Shara will start to just build those kicks, leg kicks, calf kicks, inside kicks, body kicks, head kicks, and it's just going to look good to the judges. And I think he's going to take a 30-27 unanimous decision over Arman Petrosyan. All right, moving on up in a fight I cannot wait for. We are looking at Magomed Ankalaev and Alexander Rakic, and this is such an incredible fight, a fight I've been waiting for so long. I'm a huge Magomed Ankalaev fan. I think he's the silent killer of the 205 division. I mean, the man has not lost a fight since 2008. 2018. Should have beat Jan Blachowicz for the belt. That fight should not have been a draw. Magomed won the fight 48-47. I mean, 3-2. Even Jan thought he won the fight. So he did get screwed in that fight. Then he had the mishap against Johnny Walker in the first fight, which was a total accident. Didn't see his knee down. And then there was a miscommunication with the ringside doctor. You know, where are you at? Johnny Walker said the desert. The doctor thought he was knocked loopy, even though they were in the desert, and they called the fight off. So it was unfortunate, but he got the revenge against Johnny Walker in the rematch and knocked him out brutally. Dropped him, I believe, hooked his head with a left hook behind the head and then hit him in the temple with a right hook, dropped him, and then followed up with a nasty, almost uppercut to the nose. I believe it broke Johnny Walker's nose. And Magomed is just a killer. I mean, what he did to Ion Cutelaba back in the day, dropping him with a nasty, I believe it was a left hook, and then followed up, knocked Ion Cutelaba out cold. So Magomed is just a landmine. I mean, he's calm, he's tactical, he's just a sniper, he's deadly, and he's such a just interesting puzzle to fight. And Alexander Rakic, you know, he was on the shelf for quite a while. He blew out his knee against Jan Blachowicz about 2 years ago. And then he came back months ago and fought Yuri Prochazka, and Yuri caught him, knocked him out, you know. So that was a great win for Yuri. But in this fight, I think Magomed is pretty much the uncrowned champ at 205. And I think Magomed should have already gotten his title shot against Alex. I don't know why Khalil wound up getting the title shot over Magomed, but this is the moment where Magomed stamps his title shot definitively without question, and I think he will beat Alexander Rakic in this fight. I think he will easily take these rounds 30-27. I think he will be the cleaner striker, he'll be the more powerful striker, and he will catch Alexander Rakic with all the right shots to hurt him and make this look good on the scorecards. And he could even possibly catch Rakic with a nasty shot in the second round and wind up knocking him out cold. I could easily see that. So I really almost picked Ankalaev by KO. I could totally see him catching Alexander like Yuri did, because he has that landmine detonating power. But I'm going to say that he just puts the pace on Rakic for 15 minutes and outstrikes him very cleanly to secure his title shot with Alex Pereira, probably early next year, sometime in March. So we are going Magomed Ankalaev by decision over Alexander Rakic. And moving on up, we are looking at Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige, and this is such an interesting fight, such an excellent matchup. Two of the best strikers in the division. Dan Ige, you know, at this point just becoming a veteran, coming off the loss to Diego Lopez, but we will not knock him for that because he took that fight on such extreme short notice, literally standing in the building. But outside of that, I mean, Dan Ige is just an excellent striker on the feet. He's got power, great combinations. He's a great boxer. But Lerone Murphy is up and coming, and the kid has looked so impressive. He's very well-rounded, excellent stand-up, great cardio management. I mean, excellent hands. And the win that he picked up against Edson Barbosa was incredibly impressive. You know, and Edson Barbosa, even though he's a bit on the decline, Edson Barbosa is one of the scariest guys in the division. I mean, he's just an absolute killer when he shows up to fights and he's on. But Lerone Murphy, man, I mean, he made a statement in that fight, beating Edson Barbosa. And I think the kid has so much talent and he has so much potential. And even though Dan Ige is still there, man, he's still a top guy. I think Lerone Murphy in this fight is going to be a bit too much. I think he's going to be faster than Dan Ige. I think he's going to mix it up better than Dan Ige. I think the kicks are going to be, a factor in this fight, and he might even possibly try to mix in a tiny bit of grappling, but I think it's a very interesting fight, a very close fight. And I am going to say Lerone Murphy picks up a 29-28 unanimous decision over Dan Ige. This fight could be close. It could be. It could be a split decision. Dan, there might be a case that Dan takes 2 rounds. But I'm going to say Lerone Murphy just is the better fighter overall in the fight. He's younger, faster, sharper, and I think he picks up the decision over Dan Ige in a very excellent matchup here. All right, and we are moving on up to our co-main event of the evening. And this is Robert the Reaper Whittaker, the former middleweight champion, versus Khamzat Chimaev, and a super interesting fight, a very, very interesting fight, long time in the making here. And, I look at this fight and I go, Khamzat stormed into the UFC and he looks so dominant, just steamrolling everybody. I mean, the knockout of Gerald Meerschaert, the things that he's done. I mean, Khamzat just looked like without question, a future champ and an absolute problem. But I would say in Khamzat's more recent performances, they've been a little more, questionable. And his fight with Kamaru Usman, man, he did not look great in that fight. Yes, he won that fight, but, I mean, Kamaru Usman was taking that fight on short notice, and Khamzat was still struggling in moments. He was getting outstruck by Usman at some points, and the fight was very, very close. In a fight where it's like, man, Usman stepping in on short notice, and yes, he's a former champion and still a phenomenal talent, but, I mean, Khamzat was starting to have problems with his cardio in that fight, and he just was having moments where he was looking like he was getting a little behind and maybe a little lost. And, before that, he fought Kevin Holland, and that was a last-minute replacement fight, and he steamrolled Kevin Holland, but that was not his, original opponents that was scheduled. So it's like Khamzat, yes, he's been dangerous and he's been dominant, but there have been shimmers of him not looking as sharp and as good as you would think he should be right now. And even though he's undefeated and he's 13-0 and he's still a killer, Robert Whittaker, I mean, is still the man, he is the former middleweight champion. He was a champion for a reason, and the only man to really, beat him is Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. But outside of those two guys, I mean, Robert Whittaker is still a killer, and he's still one of the best strikers in the division. And he's so well-rounded. He is such a slick striker on the feet. He cuts angles so well. I mean, he's incredible. And what he did in the Paulo Costa fight, picking Paulo apart, and then what he did to Ikram Araskarov, and coming back and knocking him out just so easily and shocking everybody. Like, damn, he just steamrolled one of the hottest prospects out of Russia right now. And so Robert, it's almost like he's building up to come back and try to get his title again and get a rematch at some point. Maybe he rematches Izzy down the road, or, maybe he actually makes it to Dricus and gets a title shot and tries to reclaim his belt. But, Whittaker has just been looking really good recently. And it almost just seems like this is his destiny to make it back to his belt. And even though this fight is so interesting and Khamzat, poses so many problems with the grappling and the pressure and the pace and the wrestling and that frenetic just energy that he has, I am actually looking at this fight going, I mean, and plus he's been off a year. In literally about a week, it will be, no, not even a week, I think less than a week, a few days, Khamzat will have been out a full year, coming off a questionable win against Kamaru Usman. So I don't think it's looking that great for Khamzat right now. And I do believe this is a 5-round fight. I think it is. And it is a 5-round fight. I had to think for a minute. This is a 5-round fight, and Whittaker has been 5 rounds, multiple times. So, he has that in his back pocket. And Khamzat has not been 5 rounds before. So, I think as this fight goes, this is just going to favor Whittaker. I mean, the cardio, the striking, the volume, and he can maintain that, and he can be smart about it. And I could see as the fight goes, Whittaker just picks up steam, and he just starts to progress. And Khamzat looks good early, but then he kind of starts to tend to fade. So I'm looking at this like it's a close fight. It's very interesting, but I am going to say that Robert Whittaker takes a decision on Khamzat Chimaev. I think he can get it done. I think the championship, and yes, it is 5 rounds. Now I found it just to confirm it. You would think it would be 3, but I guess they're going to make it 5 just because it's such a big fight. But I'm going to say that Robert Whittaker he's going to bring out that championship experience, that 5-round experience, that cardio, that technical striking, and I think he can get the championship rounds under his belt, and I think he can steal this fight from Khamzat Chimaev, and I think he can possibly stop the hype train, because Khamzat he's not been fighting recently. He's been on the shelf. His performance against Usman wasn't that great, and the win over Kevin Holland, who came in last second, not saying a whole lot. I mean, yes, it was dominant. It was a quick submission win, but I mean, I am not seeing all the full hype still for Chimaev, and I think he's beatable. I think top 5 guys can beat him. So I'm going to say Robert Whittaker gets this done, and he beats Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going to say he beats Chimaev 48-47. I think he takes it 3-2 at the least. Maybe a 49-46, 4-1. Maybe Khamzat can steal a round or 2 with the grappling, but then I think Robert's experience and that 5-round experience, the championship pedigree, he's going to come back and he will outstrike Khamzat Chimaev. So we are going Robert Whittaker by decision. And now we are at the main event of the evening, and we are looking at Ilia Topuria versus Max Blessed Holloway, and what an absolutely incredible fight. I mean, I love this fight so much. Max Holloway is one of my all-time favorite fighters. I still think there is a case to give him the greatest featherweight of all time. I mean, he is just an absolute legend. He has beat and fought the who's who, and I mean, he's just an incredible fighter, the best striker in the UFC, one of the best chins of all time, one of the best personalities of all time. I mean, how can you not like Max Holloway? He is an incredible fighter, and what he did to Justin Gaethje a few months ago was absolutely mind-blowing, telling him to get in the fucking middle and just throwing down and knocking him out cold on the horn. I mean, one of the most stone-cold Terminator badass fucking moments in UFC history, and that's why you love Max Holloway. But Ilia Topuria he is the new breed. He is the new style Spanish Terminator, man, and he has just been looking so good. His knockout against Jai Herbert, picking up the win against Bryce Mitchell, and then knocking out Alexander Volkanovski out cold was just absolutely crazy. And Max Holloway has lost to Volkanovski multiple times now, so for Ilia to come out and knock Volkanovski out the way he did, almost so easily in that second round, was just absolutely incredible. And Ilia he's improved so much. His power, his striking technique, his boxing is so clean. But Max has that volume and that range and that movement, and this fight is so damn close. This is a near coin flip fight. And I've gone back and forth on it, and I've struggled with it because I hate picking against Max, and I never pick against Max, and I am 98%, 95% right on his fights most of the time. And it's just so tough, and a part of me wants to pick Max so bad, and I could see, his championship experience and all the fight time that he's had over this amazing career helping him in this fight, with his range and his volume and his speed and his movement. And I could easily see him getting this done. Ilia comes in looking good in the early rounds, looking powerful, looking sharp, and then Max's experience and that volume starts to just pick at Ilia, and he just starts to overwhelm him. And it very well could happen. And Max takes this fight 48-47, 3-2, and regains that belt. But I'm looking at it and going, man, Ilia is just such a problem right now. I mean, and what he did to Volkanovski is so telling. It's so just prominent, like, holy shit. And in this fight, even though I want to pick Max so bad, and there is still such a potential for him to win this fight so easily with his experience and his volume, I'm looking at this and going, Ilia's boxing is so good. His technique is so good. His striking, his power, the way that he presses you. And I could see that giving Max fits. I could see him stealing this fight with the power and the pace and getting Max against the cage. And if he can avoid Max's volume and his length, he could land some bombs on him. Now, he's saying he's knocking Max out. That ain't happening. I do not believe Ilia Topuria is knocking Max Holloway out. I don't think anybody's knocking Max Holloway out anytime soon, or if ever. But I could see him putting that kind of pace and pressure on Max, where the volume, the power is what edges these rounds for him, and just landing the harder, cleaner shots, even though Max is going to be landing volume in between. And I think Ilia can steal this fight by a hair, because I think he's the new breed. It is most likely his time to reign as champion, and what he did to Volk was so damn impressive. And even though it pains me and I want to pick Max, I am going to pick Ilia Topuria to retain the belt by decision, but I think this fight is so damn razor close. It could be a 48-47 split decision. It could be a controversial fight. Max could win it and they give it to Ilia, or Ilia could win it and they give it to Max, and it could be that close. And I love the fight, and if Max wins, I will not be shocked at all. But after Ilia knocking Volk out cold, stone cold dead in the grave like that, I'm just like, oh man, he's looking so good. He's looking so promising, and I think it might be his time. So I am going to pick Ilia Topuria by decision by a micro hair. But if Max wins, I will not be surprised, and I will not be upset. So we are going to say Ilia Topuria by decision, and thank you all so much. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you with my predictions for UFC 309. Take care.